bunch of Senate Democrats to talk about the qualities they want in a judge. And before they've even heard who this individual is, you've got some of them saying absolutely no. I mean, that just shows you that it's all about politics. It's not about qualification. The president has a right to have his nominees taken up. That is part of, and so for them, it is going to, the default used to be unless qualified, confirmed. And it is now going to always no. And I think that's a pretty sad message, not just what they heard from the president, but I think that they heard loud and clear from the American people, and especially if you think of where the Democratic Party has gone in the last 8 years. They've lost seats at every level. They were supposed to take back the Senate. They didn't. They're at a the Republicans did very well in the House. We won the presidency. The president won 9 of 13 battleground states, 33 states overall, 2,600 counties. The message came through loud and clear that the American people wanted decisive leadership. They're getting it. I think if you're a Senate Democrat, you've got to wonder whether or not you're getting outside of Washington enough. Thank you guys very much. I'll see you tomorrow.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer leaving the briefing room after an intense, briefing there with reporters. He went through a number of issues defending President Trump's executive order on immigration and the travel ban, defended it with its timing, defended its rollout, defended why they chose those 7 countries, saying that they were originally on a list that the Obama administration had. We're going to have a fact check and a context check for you about that in just a moment. He also said it was nothing more than an inconvenience for those who were detained at the airport, and that the country is now safer because they were detained. Also a lot of confusion about who is going to be let in, how that is going to work as this executive order gets implemented. NBC News is now reporting that Secretary Mattis is drafting a list of individuals who would be exempt from the travel ban. That is supposed to include folks like interpreters, Iraqi interpreters who helped during the invasion effort back during the invasion of Iraq. He also, Sean Spicer, pushed back quite a bit when it comes to the NSC and who exactly will be on the principals committee for the NSC, the permanent members of the NSC. Why the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the DNI were not included in every meeting, and why someone like Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's chief strategist, will be on that permanently. But before we get to all that, we're going to go into it. I want to read you a little bit of breaking news from former President Obama, who is now officially weighing in on the current state of politics for the first time since leaving office. He's issued a statement through his spokesman saying President Obama is heartened by the level of engagement taking place in communities around the country. Obviously, they are referring to the protests that have been happening. In his final official speech as president, he spoke about the important role of citizens and how all Americans have a responsibility to be the guardians of our democracy, not just during an election, but every day. Citizens exercising their constitutional right to assemble, organize, and have their voices heard by their elected officials is exactly what we expect to see when American values are at stake. With regard to comparisons to President Obama's foreign policy decisions, as we've heard before, the president fundamentally disagrees with the notion of discriminating against individuals because of their faith or religion. Joining me now to talk about this more is Chief Legal Correspondent Ari Melber, here with me on set. Also NBC White House Correspondent Kristen Welker, who will join me from the North Lawn at the White House, and Richard Stengel, former editor of Time and former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs in the Obama administration. Guys, we've got a lot to break down. So let's start with the travel ban, because obviously that is dominating the headlines. Sean Spicer there really pushing back and saying, hey, this list is not our list. This was the Obama administration's list. Can you tell me in what way are they using that list, and are they giving it the full context that it was originally drafted in?
No, it is true that the travel ban neither mentions religion nor most of the countries affected. What it does is incorporate a list that was basically on the shelf in the law for a very different purpose. It was a list of countries that if mostly European tourists passed through, they would get extra vetting. That is to say, it was a statement by the Congress and signed by President Obama that those were dangerous places to go.
Yeah.
You look at them up on the screen, that is obviously a completely different piece of information or metric than places that are dangerous when they export immigrants. While the vast majority of the threat is not from immigrant-related terrorism, and homegrown terrorism has been a big and distinct problem, if you do look at the immigrant piece, you end up with what we've heard all about and what folks have been sharing online all over the weekend. Oh, Saudi Arabia, UAE, other countries than these 7. haven't. It is legally interesting and potentially helpful to the Trump administration that they did find some statutory basis. That could be a good thing for them in court. But as a security matter, it looks increasingly absurd, and there is something missing here. I didn't hear it anywhere in this press conference, and I didn't hear it over the weekend. And that is a straightforward security rationale for these countries. It is odd in the extreme for this administration to come in and say, we got a mandate to do things differently. We won this race. We're going to change it up. And here's what we're going to do. Rely on something Obama did. And our only explanation is Obama did it. Except, oops, Obama didn't do it. This is odd.
You know, I want to ask you a little bit more about the legal framing of this, specifically Rudy Giuliani. But first I want to go over to Kristen Welker, who's actually in the briefing room. She was there. You saw her ask the question. Kristen, you were asking Sean Spicer about whether they're worried that this might inflame tensions overseas, whether they're worried that this could result in a pushback, an anti-American sentiment in the Middle East. Did you find that the White House was concerned about that?
One of their concerns, and what we saw over the weekend, Katie, is on jihadist websites they were celebrating this travel ban, effectively saying this is going to be a recruiting tool, and that's what critics of this ban point to. Michael Hayden, for example, saying that the ban is going to make the United States less safe, but you saw Sean Spicer push back there vigorously and say that's not the case, and he went back to that list of 7 countries that you guys are talking about, and the fact that President Obama initially identified those 7 countries, and you saw me say, but he never issued a travel ban against those 7 countries, and that's the major difference, and that's where that part of the argument falls apart. So in terms of the long-term impact, that remains to be seen. But Katie, he was also pressed on the rollout of this, the reporting that we have and other news organizations have, that the White House failed to adequately brief its interagency counterparts, so that the DHS, DOD, to some extent were caught off guard, and that led to what a lot of critics called a botched rollout. You saw all of those protests over the weekend, and dozens of people being detained at the airports who shouldn't have been detained. Spicer pushed back against that as well, really digging in, saying he thought ultimately it was a minor inconvenience. That will be a point of debate, particularly when you have a 5-year-old Iranian boy who is detained, and other stories that are similar to that. So what you're seeing, though, Katie, is the White House really digging in on defense, trying to make the case that ultimately this is in the interest of national security and will make the country safer. And again, that remains to be seen. What we have seen is a lot of backlash from Democrats, but also Republicans and human rights leaders, Katie.
Kristen Welker referring to a 5-year-old boy who was at Dulles Airport and was detained and had to wait for hours to be reunited with his obviously very concerned mother. It's notable that not on this list are any of the countries that were part of the 9/11 attacks. None of the 9/11 attackers were from any of the countries that are on this list.
Right.
So talk to me, why would they not be included? How do they justify that?
Well, in the case of Saudi Arabia, which produced 9 of the 15 hijackers, we have a very close relationship with Saudi Arabia, and the exclusion of some of the other Sunni states like the UAE, I think this speaks to the fact that we have better relations with them. But as Kristen said and Ari said, a lot of these countries on the list are countries, moderate nations in some cases, that we have to work with against Al-Qaeda and against ISIS. And the fact that not creating executive order that has to do with immigration of refugees, that touches so many aspects of the government, from the Justice Department to the FBI to DNI to the State Department, and not letting people know in advance so they can communicate outward was a dreadful mistake.
Is this just an example of this administration saying, you know, we said we're going to do it and we're going to do it, so we did it?
I can't tell you that, but I think what I hope they learn is, I mean, government is this incredibly complicated network of different nodes and agencies and bureaus. And what you have to do is you have to let everybody know.